Okay, so here we go with part 2 of the John Titor story, which I'm trying to fit into a 4-part series of just reading his old stuff, which is no longer available in the quantity that I have it anymore on the internet. It's gone. So I took notes long time ago, years ago, thought I'd want to hang on to this just in case it became relevant in the future. And that future seems like it's now, and it's becoming quite relevant. Very interesting. So, as I read this, take it with a grain of salt. There's no telling if this is real, fake. It might be. Don't know. Just enjoy the show. They ask him, who receives the Nobel Peace Prize for time travel? Since you claim no two world lines are the same, this information could not hurt anything. There are a great many people involved with the discovery of time travel. Just as I will not give stock tips, I will not divulge their names as that may impact their lives now. What would happen if you gave us technical information that's discovered in a year or so? He says, if I had any and I published them, I'm sure they may have a large impact. Unfortunately, I don't have any with me. Even if I did, I'm sure they would be scrutinized. Again, we get back to the same question. If you were a time traveler, what would you do to establish your credibility? What happens to some person's name? Am I involved in time travel? What of the armed resistance? I have no idea what happens to you in your future. There was a resistance on my world line, but their goal was to maintain power and control over other people. We killed most of them by 2020. Are there still books in 2036? Yes, books are still published. What do they look for when choosing someone for a mission? Depending on the mission, time travelers are usually chosen for a specific mission based on their ability to gain the cooperation of someone related to the goal on the target world line. In my case, my grandfather was directly involved with the building and programming of the IBM computer, the 5100 model. If a time traveler is bad and commits murder or goes crazy, is there any way they can be recalled? He says there is a difference of philosophy between us that should be clarified. Since I believe that all possible outcomes and events are possible, probable, and certain, it is impossible to assign goodness or badness to a person or situation. On some other world line, I am an insane time traveler causing destruction and death, while some other guy, he just says name of so-and-so on this forum, chases me with his band of devoted followers. However, on this world line, I am not. Since both events are certain, their value is neutral. It's kind of like the yin and the yang. I'm saying that, not him. You can only assign goodness and badness to the events and experiences you have direct control over or witness. Only actions are good and bad, not people or things. I suppose if I was a psychotic killer, I could accomplish my mission, avoid capture, and still return to my world line of origin without penalty. There would be no way for them to know what happened. However, I believe that action is wrong, and I would be accountable to my God. How do you know our world line and yours will follow the same path? And he says, this world line and my own are almost exactly alike. Why don't you give us more detailed information about the future so we won't be so skeptical? He says, I think skepticism is a good thing and no one should lose it. You should still give us details about the future that wouldn't harm anyone and still add to your credibility. Again, I do not ask or seek to add to my credibility. There is no point to it. Actually, by providing information that was useful, I would be adding to your collective fear that I am real. In that case, this cycle we are in concerning truth only spirals and gets worse. Why can't you name the 5 presidents you have in your time? He says, over the past few postings, I have tried to describe the limits of what I will talk about and why. Here is a short recap list. In the future postings, I will place the following number next to each question as to why I will not discuss it. Number 1, I will not disclose any information that will cause someone to personally gain by its knowledge. This means no stock or sports tips. 2, I will not disclose any detailed information that would allow someone to avoid death by probability. This means no earthquake or bombing information. 3, I will not disclose any information that may compromise any future actions by individuals or threaten their family and well-being. He says, on my world line, we are no longer afraid of the NWO, New World Order. And he says, are you afraid of Nazis? The reason the job of president was split into an office of 5 has 4 main reasons. With 5 presidents, foreign policy is more consistent. Power shifting between parties has less of an impact on overall government. Individual strengths between presidents add to the strength of the overall office, and one president is elected for each major area in the United States. So they ask him, what is the extent of the presidential power in 2036? He says, the office of president is far more diluted and centralized than it is here. The powers of the national government are more defined and reside more at the county and state levels. They ask him, what is the new government like in 2036 compared to the current one? He says, I think the new government is good. However, since the concept of nationally subsidized welfare is gone, most people here on this world line may not appreciate it. Let me stop for a second. He thinks the new government is good. However, since the concept of nationally subsidized welfare is now gone on his world line, no more welfare, no more handouts, most people here may not appreciate it. So again, as I've said 40 times now, going back to the year 2000, I don't have the statistics in front of me of people on, for example, food stamps. That's a different number than welfare per se, but at the same time, anyone on welfare is absolutely getting food stamps. I mean, it's almost hand in hand. Considering in 2008, 8 years after this speech he gave here, we had 25 million people on food stamps, and a mere 5 years later, we have like 50 plus now million. It has doubled in 5 years. That line makes a hell of a lot more sense now than it ever would have in the year 2000. Again, interesting comment. Where is the U.S. Capitol, the new U.S. Capitol? The new U.S. Capitol is in Omaha, Nebraska. And the story goes on, by the way, where he told his parents now on this world line to leave Florida and go to Nebraska. And not necessarily because Florida will be the worst place ever. That's not why. Just that being in Nebraska, according to him, was better. It's near the western side where there's a lot of farming activity, and the new capital is going to be there. And from what I understand, the guy that led them to victory was a farmer who was out of that area. He didn't get into detail. And he may talk about that here, or maybe in the other part of the other stuff I have to read you later on. I just want to clarify that. Here we go. How do the 5 presidents take power? He says the voting for individual candidates is on a rotating schedule. What are the other time travelers' destinations and missions? He says, I am not aware of the details of other missions. Of the 7, 3 had already left before I did. I suspect they are on similar missions. Is it possible to send a message through time? Unless the information physically travels with the person, none that I'm aware of. If you are from the future, then you should know what happens to so-and-so, and they don't list his name. Am I involved in time travel? He says, this is the only question I found from your postings that you could be referring to. Again, I have no knowledge of you in any possible future, nor would I comment on it if I did. As far as a photograph of me in a uniform, I'm not sure what that would prove even if I had one. And again, if you're wondering why, it sounds like he answered a different question there. The way this was just put together, sometimes he would answer a bunch of things at one time from posts that were way up here. So I just put it the way I had it. Nothing I can do about that. Your future seems to be fixated on killing people. Isn't there a criminal justice system, or do you just enjoy killing people? He says, perhaps you could take the dialogue in question and post it with your question. However, if I understand you, you're asking about death on my world line. Yes, it is more of a part of our lives than it is yours, at least for now, he says. And capital punishment is a reality. Although the documents posted were printed from a computer printed, is it really that hard to believe that manual typing is just a bit more common in 30 years? After the war, many things like manual printing machines, typewriters, bicycles, sailboats, and hand tools are valued a great deal. I have noticed more people in California are installing wood-burning stoves. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. because I believe after this solar cycle we're in now, which is ending either this year or next year, I think it's supposed to be this year, which would mean we could have a very powerful winter. And then after this cycle, allegedly the global climate should be cooler going forward for I don't know how long, maybe a long time. It should be generally cooler across the globe. So that's another thing I want to talk about. There's a little WebBot update, very small. It's not really a WebBot update more than it is Cliff's Wujo thing. I'll talk about that in another video, where he discusses a brutal cold winter coming. But the Farmer's Almanac is also saying a cold winter's coming. And let's just say, bear with me, let's just say we do have a very cold winter. And then all of a sudden, for God knows how long now, we're in some kind of new cycle planet-wide, and it's just colder out than, for the whole planet, generally speaking, than normal. And it's not bad, but it's just colder. The fact that he just said, again, completely unnecessary comment by him. No one asked anything about wood-burning stoves and heating and nothing. He throws in there at the end, I have noticed more people in California are installing wood-burning stoves. Wood-burning stoves do not need electricity. And if something like what he says, World War III or some big event happens, including a catastrophe from whether it's an earthquake or whatever, and it's wintertime, there's going to be some cold people. And even if you have, I got a 300-gallon gas tank of propane, oh, good. Okay, that lasted not even all winter. Now what are you going to do? A wood-burning stove would be real handy, wouldn't it? So again, this is one of those things where he adds to the end that's like, just like, really? Like, where did that come from? It's almost like a little hint. Are the Olympics still being played in the future? He says, as a result of the many conflicts, no, there were no official Olympics after 2004. However, it appears they may be revived in 2040. So again, we're clearly past 2004. We had the 2008 Olympics and the 2012 Olympics. Everything seems okay. However, if whatever the hell's about to happen in the Middle East, because I know we got some more Olympics coming up, in the future here. There's usually the summer and the winter Olympics or whatever. If any Olympics, winter or summer, gets canceled anytime in the near future, I'm going to remember this guy talking about that. A little bit of a precursor event to look for. What sort of future do you imagine after 2036? Will we colonize the solar system? He says, keep in mind that not all humans were destroyed, but we were all affected. There's a lot of effort going into colonizing space because it is believed that the problems of overpopulation were a large cause of the war. Personally, my generation sees itself as having a duty to try and repair the mess our fathers handed to us. When we were young, most of us had a small taste of the world you live in now. And our only dream is to clean it up and give it back to those still able to have children. He says, number one, industrial mass production does not produce the unaccountable tonnage of useless consumer items so gleefully absorbed by your society. I would estimate there are about 10 units, talking about his time machine, like mine, which he calls the C204, and 20 larger units, the C206. The main difference is the sensitivity and the number of main cesium clocks. I would estimate that some sort of public time travel will be common around 2045. I want to yawn out loud in front of you. What? Okay, number two. I'm not aware of any other time travelers here now. But if they are here, I'm sure they're poring over sports history books so they can go back in time another week and start a friendly conversation on the web. He's being sarcastic. 3. The mad cow disease story here has yet to begin, but don't worry. The fruited gelatin desserts are safe. Number 4. I'm glad to see it's so easy for you to dismiss the Middle East. Yes, I suppose it's a no-brainer, but pretty soon it will be a no armor and no lager. Let me stop you. Stop myself. Year 2000, he's writing this. The Iraq War was 1990. That was long ago. And he didn't say Iraq specifically. He said the Middle East. So since he's been gone, JSnip4 can read you his old stuff. Okay, that was awful. I probably should edit that out, but I'm not going to because I don't have time for silly games. I'm glad to see it's so easy for you to dismiss the Middle East. Yes, I suppose it's a no-brainer, but pretty soon it will be a no armor and no legger. We had the invasion of Iraq, Pakistan. We helped overthrow Yemen. We helped overthrow Libya. We're now trying urgently, badly to overthrow Syria. We overthrew Egypt. Now they've overthrown the guy we overthrew them with. That's falling apart, right? The whole Middle East is going up in flames, so to speak. We're losing control there. We don't have any kind of control in Syria. We got to get back into that. So the fact that we have to do that again means we need to get boots on the ground. So as you're hearing right now live while I'm doing this, we're beating the war drums to go to the Middle East. And Secretary of Defense Hagel says it doesn't matter about the UN. We have a duty, an obligation to go help innocent civilians and children that have been attacked with chemical weapons. Again, weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons. Saddam's got chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. So we're all over the Middle East. And this is how it looks like World War III is going to start. So now he's saying, in the year 2000, right, absurd claim, I'm glad to see it so easy for you to dismiss the Middle East. Yes, I suppose it's a no-brainer, but pretty soon it will be a no armor and no legger, he says in quotes. Interesting. Unfortunately, winners of historical sports betting events are not high on the priority list of people in 2036. As a thought experiment, if I did tell you who the winning horse was and you killed the horse before the final race, would that make me a liar, or would it support my statement that our world lines are about 2% different? In other words, they're not identical, which means that horse could have died anyways. Do you know who won the race 30 years ago? Good point. If you could change one thing about your government right now, what would it be? They're asking him that. So he says the United States is still a representative republic in 2036, but it was touch and go for a while. After the war, the U.S. had divided into 5 general areas based on their economic and defensive strengths. Many people blame the government organization. Interesting that he doesn't just say the government, but calls it a government organization. Whatever. Most people blame the government organization for the war, and the last Constitutional Congress was held in 2020 to officially scrap the Constitution and start over. Fortunately, this exercise in anger pointed out how hard it was to come up with anything better. It was decided that the document was not at fault. As a result, there have been a few small changes to the Constitution and the executive branch, but you would easily recognize it. The average citizen is more educated about the Constitution and aware of the rights and responsibility it gives them. Federal power has been decentralized, and the focus of daily politics is in the state senates. Not the Senate, but the state senates. Federal law has also been streamlined, but much harder to change or make additions to. The people who signed my paycheck told me why we needed, this is another answer I guess, why we needed a 5100 computer and sent me off to get one. I was not in a position to make alternate suggestions. As I recall, isn't the Cray a rather large system? The computer he's talking about. We need something portable. The 5100 isn't required for its reliability. It's needed to translate between APL, Unix, and a few obscure IBM mainframe languages. The fishing is great, and you're more than welcome to join us, but the me here is only 3 years old. I'll have to tell him you're coming. You'll notice when it comes time for citizens' rights, how much of a sheeple we are, how we don't look at what rights we have, we don't care about the Constitution that's trampled on. When he gets on that, he's very passionate about what he has to say and gives a lot of detail about the future and how important it is for the citizens to get taught and learn and know about their rights in the Constitution. Again, why does he have to bring that kind of thing up? If you're from the future, why bring anything up about government and politics? Screw that. Tell us about flying saucers and, particle degenerators that can regenerate you across the world and, like the movie The Fly, and that's nothing about what he talks about. It's all about you guys, your welfare state. You're sucking the teat off the government. The government's corrupt. They're the enemy. In the year 2000, most people would be looking around saying, "Hey, this is still great America, democracy, right?" Back then, and what were we in debt? About $5 trillion, $4 trillion, maybe something like that. Hey, not anymore. So continuing on. Can you give us some personal stories of your past? He says, I was born in 1998, so I do share some of the childhood memories with all of you. I remember going to Disney World at Christmas. I remember going to the beach at Daytona. When the civil conflict started and got worse, people generally decided to either stay in the cities and lose most of their civil rights under the guise of security, or leave the cities for more isolated and rural areas. Our home was searched once and the neighbors across the street was arrested for some unknown reason. That convinced my father to leave the city. From the age of 8 to 12, we lived away from the cities and spent most of our time in a farm community with other families, avoiding conflict with the federal police. Federal police. That's funny, because a lot of times when dictators take over, they have a federal police force established. Do we have one of the... Department of Homeland Security. There we go. We already got that. And they were established after this guy left. Right after he left, as a matter of fact. Imagine that. That's incredible. So they stayed in a farming community with other families, avoiding conflict with the federal police and National Guard. By that time, it was pretty clear that we were not going back to what we had, and the division between the cities and the country was well defined. My father made a living by putting together 12-volt electrical systems and selling commodities up and down the coast of Florida. I spent most of my time helping him. Outright open fighting was common by then, and I joined a shotgun infantry unit in 2011. I served with the Fighting Diamondbacks for about 4 years. Hearing in my right ear isn't as good as I would like it. The Civil War ended in 2015 when Russia attacked the U.S. cities, who are, parentheses, our enemy. U.S. cities were his enemy. So keep in mind, he just made a comment. By that time, when he lived out in the country, by that time it was pretty clear that we were not going back to the city, what we had there, and the division between the cities and the country was well defined. So he says then the Civil War ended in 2015. The Civil War ended in 2015 when Russia attacked the U.S. cities. Our enemy, he says, the U.S. cities. And he continues, let me just read this sentence. The Civil War ended in 2015 when Russia attacked the U.S. cities, our enemy, China, and Europe. As unusual and as bad as my childhood might seem, I would not trade it for anything. Africa is not a pleasant place to be in 2036, although I would characterize it as recovering. The music you enjoy now is quite popular and available. It's just not produced anywhere near the same amount. There is a revival of local and classical music. Many people have learned to play their own instrument. I personally enjoy big band, some classical, and interesting lyrical pieces from the 70s and 80s, 1970s and 1980s. Yes, we still have football, and you will easily recognize it in 2036. Yes, there are significant advances in computer science. It's interesting how easy it is to be fixated on the machine itself without any curiosity about many of the support systems. This is not really big news, but if then is out, and if then maybe is in. Yes, I am with the me on this world line, and he is 3 years old now. I find that fact to be rather hard for people to get along with, so I don't bring it up directly. This is the second time I have, quote, met myself. The machine, time machine, is owned by the military. I am part of a unit stationed in Tampa, Florida. The real energy is in creating the machine, not operating it. It's interesting you should bring up the divergence percentage. In other words, how much of a divergence between world lines there are. You may find it entertainingly interesting to know that the divergence can be more accurate with more sensitive gravity sensors and clocks. The C206, now remember, his unit is the C204. The C206 uses 6 cesium clocks. His uses 4. In an active method of timing the changes in the atom. We time travel to solve problems. A great deal of effort is going into repairing the environment and infrastructure. Now back to that one thing he said. This is really not big news regarding computers and software, but if then is out and if then maybe is in. Now I do a little bit of database programming. Microsoft Access with the SQL backend. I do Visual Basic for applications programming, and there's quite a bit of if-then statements that I have to use. I'll give you an example of what he may be meaning here. If-then is where we're at nowadays. In the future, he's saying there's an additional one. If-then or maybe is another option. Let's say you have 3 checkboxes on a page, and you want to check a box like on a form, right? Checkbox 1, checkbox 2, checkbox 3. You can put code behind the checkbox. Basically, I'm going to talk in layman's terms to make this easy to understand. And you can say, if checkbox 1 is checked or is true, again, layman's terms, if checkbox 1 is checked, then, there's the if then do something. Print the following message, right? Hello. You click checkbox 1, hit OK. Right? So you just wrote some code, if then. If the checkbox is checked, then spit out this message. That's it. You could do a lot more than that, but that's just an example. What he's saying is that's there, but now you may not have an if-then. You may say if checkbox 1 is checked, then do this, or maybe do this. Whereas now it's either one or the other. There's an else statement. If checkbox 1 is checked, then do this, or else do this. In other words, raise your hand or don't raise your hand. That's the only 2 options. He's saying there's going to be a maybe. And the computer software will actually figure out the maybe. And one time it may not do it. Another time it might do it. That's where the maybe comes in. And I guess the computer is going to have its own kind of logic that can figure it out. That's my interpretation for you. Okay? Moving on. Who wins the sporting event for the next 20 years? I don't know. Even if I did, you could stop the horse anyway and make it untrue. Number 2. Who will be elected president for the next 20 years? He says, please see his other response, where I'm not going to talk about that. Please tell me if the price of gold. Please tell me the price of gold for the last 20 years. Man, I wish he would have answered this one. I don't understand the importance of this type of information. Please tell me your opinion why this is interesting and worth remembering for 30 years. And again, after a civil war, after World War III, rebuilding society, why would the price of gold matter? Especially now, in our society that he kind of wants to spit on. I really did wish he would have said something, though. 5. Will it still be lawful for me to own handguns? In his reply, a little sarcasm, I thought owning a handgun was legal in the United States. Yes, being familiar with firearms, along with other responsibilities of the Constitution, becomes an important part of people's lives in 30 years. Is Korea united? I guess you could say that. Taiwan, Japan, and Korea were all forcefully annexed before End Day. And I believe it was China that kind of forced them to be pals again. Hey, we got to fight the world now. We're all Asian. Let's handle business. I don't remember a great deal about media coverage during the civil conflicts. I would probably characterize it in the same way you see coverage of Waco, Ruby Ridge, and Elian Gonzalez. That's interesting. And that's kind of like what we see today on YouTube. Dairy farmer, organic farmer, SWAT raid. Guy didn't pay his parking tickets, SWAT raid. You follow me? That's becoming more and more common. So again, one hell of a statement to say here in the year 2000. From my point of view, yes, this is an alternative timeline. From your point of view, no. And again, I don't know what question he just answered. Australia is sort of interesting in what is unknown. After the war, they were not very cooperative or friendly. Can't blame them, really. It is known that they did repulse a Chinese invasion and most of their cities were hit. They have a trading relationship with the U.S., but I would characterize them as reclusive and ticked off. After reading the questions, I want to paint a picture that may help with the general theme of our collective experience in 2036. The war had very profound effects on people and how they relate to each other. As individuals, almost everyone in 2036 is very familiar with death. We all have stories of loved ones that have died from disease, war, or acts of inhumanity. Most of us have even taken part in dishing out the same things to the other side. As a result, we have become far more compassionate to the ones we love, but much less forgiving to those who don't pull their weight. We are more accepting of others' differences in our community because we depend on them to survive. We are also more conservative with our resources and closer to God because for a period, life on earth was hell. The other major difference is in the concept of good and evil. With multiple worlds come multiple decisions and outcomes. For every good act, there is an equal and opposite bad act on another world line. Taken to the extreme, this must mean that in God's eyes, there is no total good and total bad in the superverse. It balances itself out into infinity. I believe we are judged on the decisions we make as individuals, and the good/evil I see on my world line is an illusion that has no worth to God. My reaction to it is what's important to God. Although this may seem rather heartless, it does allow me to see past the evil that people do and acknowledge the core of potential goodness inside them. We do not live in a racist society, but definitely a prejudiced one. Everyone carries their own water. Our government looks very much like yours. It is a representative republic. My definition of a patriot is anyone who defends the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Religion has become far less centralized. Extremes tend to bring you closer to God, so I would characterize religion and spirituality as much more of a personal institution. It's difficult to define the most predominant religion. Christianity has fragmented into many groups, and people with different beliefs speak much more openly with others who have different outlooks and opinions. I would imagine there are large groups of Hindus, Buddhists, and Muslims, but I have not come across them personally. No, Jesus did not come back, at least not that I am aware of. If or when Jesus returns, do you think he'll be a lamb or a lion? No mission to Mars, but we are working on it. There is a group working on the idea of a gravity displacement unit to get into space, but the calculations and error rate are very large obstacles to overcome. We don't know what's on Mars yet. We're not on the moon yet either, or back on it. A great deal of technical effort is going into cleaning up the planet. So everything is focusing on the planet right now because it's in bad conditions in his world line. I'm not aware of any mind control devices being used on you now. However, there are a great many non-lethal weapon systems in development that turn out to be quite lethal. Sometimes I watch your television programs that show SWAT teams using new non-lethal weapons. They usually start out with, in the future, the army and police will fight its enemies with new weapon systems. And he says when they use the word enemy, they're talking about you. You don't really think the Marines are going to jump out of helicopters overseas with sticky goop, pepper spray, and Caesar lights, do you? No, bozo. That's for you. That's what he's saying. And sure enough, Department of Homeland Security, who are they for? You. I'm not familiar with the term psionics. I'll look it up and see if we have another word for it. Yes, Europe is a mess. Yes, I think the New World Order idea tried to establish itself. I would consider them the combination of the old U.S. federal system, Europe, Canada, and Australia. When you say teleportation, I assume you mean public transportation. Yes, we have a basic high-speed system. I don't know if the government created AIDS. I tend to think yes, but controlling it escaped them as it mutated. You can't have conspiracy to limit the population with the disease without the cure. I'd probably argue against that and say, yeah, you can, and once the numbers are reached that you feel comfortable with the population being wiped out, then you come up with the cure and say, okay, here's the cure. But again, this is just an average person. Doesn't mean he knows all the conspiracies, all that stuff. Just an average person. He got chosen to do a time travel mission, etc. Yes, homosexuals are in the army. You tend to look past the individual differences of people when their job is to protect your life. Yes, there are gay people in 2036. I am a white male. Yes, there is an entertainment industry. Again, it is very decentralized. The technology to express yourself with video is so readily available that many people do it all by themselves or in small groups. Much of the distribution is over the web. I would compare it to theater here. Again, YouTube was not around when he wrote this. It was years, 2005. This is supposed to be from 2000. 5 years later, YouTube shows up. And that was when YouTube got started. It was years later when people really started to do little shows and things on YouTube to where it's almost like watching your own little TV show or, your favorite guy. Me, I'm just kind of I don't really do shows and that kind of production. I just read to you on camera and talk on the camera. Sometimes I do a parody. But it's very interesting for someone to say this is what coming in the future, and here it is now. I don't know what you mean by VR. I think someone asked him do you know about VR, virtual reality? I guess he understood what he meant. The average lifespan is about 60, but I expect that will improve as we get things cleaned up. Yes, paper money is still widely used. The 21st century has a while to go, but the most significant person, in my opinion, is the farmer general who led us to victory. Even for you, Tesla technology can be found in appliances, motors, and generators. I would have to say we have come a long way on Tesla's foundation, but we don't have electricity rays that cause earthquakes. Yes, we have the death penalty. We also have public punishment. The most common crime is theft. I don't understand what you mean by race mixing. Cloning is not common, however, altering the sperm and egg cell are common. It is very difficult to have children in 2036 for environmental reasons. It's hard to say what exact racial makeup in the U.S. is. I would say it's probably the same, minus 130 million people or so. No, there is no segregation. The education system is very similar to yours, but the organization and implementation is controlled on a community and county level. I love it. Various communities also specialize in certain disciplines in the school system. My comments on equal rights and women's roles could be quite lengthy and controversial. I wish to discuss that separately. However, women do fight in the military just as men do, but their role on the community level is very conservative. Having children is such a serious issue in 2036 that birth control is almost unheard of. It is very difficult and precious to have and raise children. Again, this is an issue I will happy to go into later. Yes, there are same-sex marriages, but it is not very common. Again, people have lived through so much hardship that if what someone else is doing does not affect them or harm the community, it is not a big issue. South America went relatively unharmed. However, there is still a great deal of internal conflict with conventional arms. Yes, people use drugs that alter their consciousness, but they are not very common. Yes, I know who the Beatles are. Old music and other entertainment is available on the web. There is another pope, but I do not know his name. Yes, EMP, electromagnetic pulse, took out a great number of electronic devices. That's one of the reasons why we don't have reliable technology lying around. However, in the opening hours of N Day, that's Nuclear Day, the Russians did not launch any high-altitude detonations. They knew we would most likely clean up after them, so they wanted everyone outside the cities to be able to communicate. Most of the warheads that hit the cities came in threes and exploded close to the ground. The heavy EMP damage was isolated to those areas. Actually, you would probably be quite impressed with our internet. It's based on a series of independent, self-powered nodes that are mobile and can be put up anywhere. It looks a great deal like your current cell phone system. Yes, there are a great many people who think the revelations has come to pass. However, the new fear is that Christ has returned. He's not telling us, and he's very angry. I am not familiar with the Fatima prophecies, but I am aware of the term. I wasn't sent here to change anything. Since it would not affect my home anyways, it would be rather pointless. Yes, handmade items and the skills to make them are quite prevalent, and people take a great deal of pride in their work. People with the skills to make clothing, work with leather, wood, or cultivate a garden have become quite valuable. Please do not think your questions are unimportant. I enjoy the conversation. And he says, Fiji, question mark. I've noticed that when most Americans think about Canada, in this time, they think about pine trees, chooks, and back bacon, Canadian bacon. It may interest you to know that most Canadians in 2036 are some of the most efficient, ruthless, and dangerous people I know. God help Quebec. Someone says you couldn't even answer one simple question about music. Unfortunately, your question is rather difficult for me. Any personal experience I might have with your world line at a specific moment is limited to my viewpoint and age. I can't tell you what music is popular in the next few years because the me here is only 3 years old. In addition, how does someone decide what the most popular music trend is? It would seem rather subjective to me. Thinking about it now, I sort of wonder what it would be like to be a teenager now and know the answer to that question. When I was 13, I used to worry about which shotgun slug would take a door handle off and whether or not I had any dry socks. Current fallout estimates are accurate, but a bit exaggerated. Your example of what people would do based on something I might say is accurate. However, my concern would be the potential actions of a single person, not the masses. In 1963, if I suggested that someone should watch the book depository windows as the president went by, the actions of a single person might have a huge impact on history. You also asked if I visited my past family. That's where I'm at now. John mentions that he has no idea what ginger is, but he mentions media hype and alludes to it not amounting to much. Again, I don't believe I said that either. My point in that conversation was about feeling manipulated by hype. Since they are asking you to buy something, I would be very interested in your lengthy and critical positions about its credibility. If you could post that, whatever. John says mechanical typewriter is a major machine again in the future, and the internet still exists and is widely used. Actually, what I said was, you may be surprised at how many people use typewriters. I don't understand the conflict. What's wrong with typewriters? At least you don't have to plug them in. No electricity or limited electricity. What is the speed of average computer in the future? Gigahertz is not a useful measurement. Computers are no longer measured by their speed as much as the number of variables, not calculations, they can handle per second. Who is the major superpower in 2036? It depends on how you define power. If you mean military, the world has developed into an odd balance. There are plenty of nuclear weapons left, but if anyone uses them, they will be instantly erased from the planet by everyone else, regardless of the politics. We are very tired of war. Are the two political parties still Republicans and Democrats? There are no Republicans or Democrats to speak of. Yes. Yes. There are now over 10 major political parties. How many states are there? The states, as you know them, still exist, but their political power has been combined with other states around them. There are now 5 major geopolitical areas in the United States. Which states are the worst to live in? When you can't drink the water, it's bad everywhere. Do companies like, I think he asked Microsoft, still exist? Popular software and internet names. He doesn't say, it just says popular software and internet name. Still exist? No. Does money look different than it does now? No, money is pretty much the same. Unfortunately, I do not have any money with me because I wouldn't be able to use it here. Does the government know there are time travel going on? He says in 2036, yes, of course. How many time travelers are there on your team? How do they choose new ones? He says, my unit has between 6 and 10. When I left, there were 7 others. Military service, physical fitness, history, or technical background and special relationship to target contacts get you in the door. Why can't you answer questions about natural disasters? No one can change something now and would cause an earthquake or stop one. I would not share information that would allow someone to avoid death by probability. Personal rules. Again, he goes over. I'm not going to talk about this. I won't talk about that. What kind of music is popular? What kind of recreation is enjoyable? What holidays are important? I'm not sure if you wanted, he says, I'm not sure if you want to discuss these or not. If yes, I will be happy to do that. Maybe privately, I'm not sure. Do you feel some pleasure in breathing clean air and not having to check a radiation counter every few miles? Yes, I do. However, there's a fear about being here that I can only define as uncertainty. When I walk around in 2001, this is the very, very beginning of 2001, when he was about to leave, the air smells clean because, by the way, everything I've written here is between 1999, 2000, and 2001. When I walk around in 2001, the air smells clean, but I wonder if it really is. In 2036, there is no gray. The air either will kill you or it's clean. That feeling is very overwhelming when I eat here. Name any near future event that makes history. You mean other than the mad cow pandemic, the breakthrough in high energy physics, CERN, and the unknown functions of the IBM 5100? I realize I've only been on this board for a few weeks, but I assume you've read the other postings I've made about these issues months ago in order to be so definitive. Is propane still around in the future? Yes, but not very much of it comes from natural gas. Hydrogen is converted into propane because it's easier to handle. Now, I'm wondering if he, again, this is just an average person. This guy doesn't know everything. Nobody would. Is he just talking about hydrogen? Because you can burn hydrogen just like you can burn propane. Why would you need to convert it? And maybe that's what he meant. That's irrelevant, honestly, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I've always thought about that. Is propane still around? Yeah, okay. I would hope the location I live in would be spared, and he says the Hawaii Islands. He says, my parents went to Hawaii. The question was, I hope the location I live in would be spared, and he says it's the Hawaii Islands. His answer is, my parents went to Hawaii on their honeymoon. My dad told me a quick story about going to a fast food store and paying $6 or $7 for a hamburger. I got an image in my head of a huge tanker filled with frozen hamburgers headed into the Pacific. Hawaii is very dependent on the mainland for food, isn't it? That's his hint. Hawaii's probably not going to do too well. If it relies on the mainland to get shipments and food, it's going to be in trouble, and it does. So, again, interesting how he gave him a little bit of a hint without straight up answering him. What happens with Australia? He said, I believe I already wrote about that. What colloquial language is used in the future? Many people use the internet for communication and entertainment. I would say that affects our speech. We type very fast. What exactly happens to the water? He says, yes, radiation affected the water, but that can always be distilled out. There are biological hazards that cannot. In addition, fresh water is hard to come by without talking to someone with a gun first. Does intercontinental transportation still exist? Have you visited other countries? Yes, it does, but the market is much smaller. No, I have not been overseas. You said you would not participate in helping anyone avoid death by probability, yet many things you said could have caused an individual to do or not do something that would now result dying or escaping death. It would help if you could give me an example. If you're referring to the conflict and war in your future, I'm not sure if I'm specific enough to help any individuals avoid anything. Suggesting there is a war coming is a bit different than saying avoid Washington, D.C. at 3:45 a.m. on March 12, 2015. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if at 3:45 a.m. March 15th, 12th on 2015, something happened? Hope not. He was just saying that sarcastically anyways. There is no way for you to be... Again, all the other dates he talked about have come and gone. That's why I said when I told you I'd do this video, keep in mind when he said these things would happen, but just listen to what he has to say. Because it's very relevant right now, and that's what's disturbing. There is no way for you to be sure there is no future world leader reading this and believing you. Are you sure about that? Besides, I think you can have just as much impact as any future leader. What is more, you will tell us no names, no locations, or any specifics as a result of your supposed ethics. If those were indeed the ethics you were committed to and reasoned with, you would not be here now. I am curious about this also. Do you think I should not interact with you for your safety or mine? Answer this and I will believe you, whatever. Again, I don't have, whatever. Artificially micro singularity equals localized Kerr field. Is this a prediction? I'm sure I would end up in one of their nice little padded cells while in your world line. I guess people are asking him to show him stuff, and he's saying no because the feds would come after him, and he has to stay here for a certain period of time because certain gravitational fields have to occur on Earth that makes it to where he can go back to his timeline properly and not go back to a completely different timeline. So he was saying, I'm sure I would end up in one of their nice little padded cells while on your timeline having things like Sasquatch, Loch Ness Monster, and other reported unusual animals. I'm not sure. We have our swamp monsters too. In fact, I think it's interesting that we all respond to the unknown the same way regardless of our cultural experiences. Is remote viewing used to gather military intelligence? I am only aware of it from this world line. I do not know otherwise. Are psychics still common? Yes, psychics exist, but I don't have any knowledge of their use by the military. Is there a police force as we know it? Have any of your leaders been jailed or impeached? Yes, we have the police, but they are organized in smaller groups. Yes, we still have political and religious leaders who find it difficult to obey the law. I would submit to you that the law is only as good as the people's willingness to apply it evenly and swiftly. Interesting comment there, because that sure ain't how it is nowadays. You're at the top, no justice. You're at the bottom, you get justice. Is there a global superpower state? Being a superpower only makes you a target. There is an uneasy balance in the world now that everyone probably has nukes, chems, or biological weapons. We don't just bomb people for the hell of it anymore. Military power is based on the number of autonomous fighting men who are actually willing to fight. Do they have old computer games in 2036? I am aware there are video games, but have not come across them. Does China have a manned space program between 2001 and 2036? I believe they are pretty close to putting a man in orbit. It shouldn't surprise you if they do that soon. Do you realize it? Again, I didn't look up the year now that I'm reminding myself of this right now. But China put their man in orbit, finally, for the first time ever. It was either in like 2003, 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. This guy was long gone. I believe they are pretty close to putting a man in orbit. It shouldn't surprise you if they do that soon. So he was right about that, but the 2004 Olympics thing, the 2011 Civil War, completely wrong. Or the other thing is, did he leave the dates out on purpose to make absolute certain the world line doesn't change any? Because any would-be leader could go find that information and read it and be like, oh my God, he knows everything we're going to do. But if you put it off by like 10 years, a decade, maybe not so much. I'm just going to throw that out there. Not saying that that's true. Do you have television in 2036? Information does arrive on video, but cathode ray tubes are out and crystal or plasma is in. Distribution is over the net, not broadcast. Do you have flashlights in 2036? If so, what type of batteries does it use? Yes, we have flashlights and we use similar batteries for most things. We do recharge a great deal. Have you ever seen those wind-up radios? Those are pretty interesting, I think. I wonder if that's a hint. Get one of those wind-up radios. We have one, by the way. How is electricity produced in 2036? Most publicly generated power is through very efficient solar cells. On a local or household level, there is steam, hydro, and inversion generation. There's a debate on using a singularity to create power, and again, the singularity is the thing that distorts gravity and makes them time travel. Does the sun look different in 2036? When you can see it through the high levels of smoke and haze, not that I'm aware of. What sort of clothing do you wear in 2036? Is there strong attention paid to what people wear in the group? Clothing is much more functional. I'm not sure what group you're talking about. He says, John Titor had a 50-50 chance of telling us the future. He says, yes, there was a 50-50 chance of that happening, but the odds were easily 1 out of 2 that it could have gone the other way. Some other odd question. Describe what you mean by functional. Do you wear light clothes, dark clothes, loose, tight-fitting? What materials are used for clothing? He says, it seems a bit obscure to have a discussion about. Do we wear radiation suits? No. Do we use pockets a lot? Yes. How does the smoke and haze allow for solar cells to be efficient? He says, do you have any idea how efficient solar cells are today? Sometimes it's sunny and sometimes it rains. Sometimes large dust clouds high in the atmosphere pass overhead. I don't understand the point you want to make. The sun looks the same. If each world line is separate from others, then wouldn't the consequences of your actions now have no effect on your original world line? Yes, that's correct. If this is the case, why don't you tell us things that will give us knowledge? He says, I am not qualified to judge if you deserve it or not, and I have no idea if you may be the next, or lack of a better reference, Hitler. However, if I were able to physically help you from your situation because I was there and I knew it was coming, I would help you. My only guess is that you are not a time traveler and you don't want to make anyone do something stupid. Yes, I am aware that is obvious first answer, but I would hope my moral and logical arguments at least make a dent in your thinking. If you were a time traveler, would you be comfortable giving out all that information after considering the possible consequences? Provided you knew it. If I were you, I would be worried about what the next time traveler might do, even by mistake. How can I leave a message for myself in the future? Just post it here, he says. Your prediction of something, national politics, pending disintegration, beginning in the 3 short years is impossible. And he replies by saying, have you seen the documentary on Waco, Texas? Remember the armed takeover siege of the religious people, in which we all know the government fired on them first, and it was a lie? So he says, have you seen the documentary on Waco? Just for argument's sake, what do you think would happen if information were discovered that confirmed the worst accusations made against the law enforcement officers there? Would you hope nothing? I personally have struggled with that one. I remember that one. What was he trying to say? Was he trying to say that in the near future, sometime in the future, which is going to help spark this civil war, was going to be information about a false flag attack, an attack where the government did it. It comes out, oh my God, the government did it, and caused a civil war. So I thought to myself, he's just using that as an example. And if it was Waco, let's just say that the information came out, oh my God, they actually went to war with them knowingly and offensively. They did it not defensively, they attacked offensively. Would that be enough to bring the whole United States nowadays, in our sheeple-like state of mind, bring us together to go fight the government? Hell no. But I thought of one other thing that did happen that would cause that, I think, even in our sheeple state of mind. If absolute undeniable proof, video, whatever it is, of 9/11 being an inside job, I think that could do it. So is he saying, again, we now have WikiLeaks, we also have the NSA guy, Snowden, with more information. Is anything going to come out from those two sources that go this way? I don't know, but that has always been in my mind since I've seen these things. You know, the recent WikiLeaks stuff and the NSA stuff. So he's saying, if information were discovered that confirmed the worst accusations, again, saying the government did it, what would you hope nothing happened? That's his answer. Is there a market for new books in 2036, or are most books available old or new? Are most of the books available old or new? Yes, but there are no large commercial printing and distribution companies. Books and other forms of hard media are distributed on the web and printed out or put out on other media from local hubs. What happens to Bill Clinton? I don't know. What happens to Bill Gates? This I do know, but I won't discuss. Why are orphans an issue? Problems with the environment still have lasting effects on all people, which cause the average lifespan to be lower. In addition, people are more susceptible to accidents, Family life and children are very highly valued, and the community takes the responsibility for raising children if their parents die. What is your biggest environmental issue? Water. You need it for everything, and there is very little left in the world that is positively safe to drink. Does distillation remove radioactivity from the water? It removes the dust and dirt particles that are radioactive. So that's good to know. Do people still watch TV? Yes, but it isn't broadcast anymore. Are there women on your time travel team? Not that I'm aware of, but I would assume there are women who are either trained or are training for the same type of work. I don't know why there wouldn't be. What is the status of women in 2036? I understand the question, but I have nothing to relate to it in 2036. The status of women is the same as men. Equality issues disappeared during the war. Do women hold office? Yes. Do women work outside the home? Women are not expected to stay home and be barefoot and pregnant, if that's what you mean. Do women get equal pay? Yes. Are women safe on the streets at night? There is still crime, but people do not attack each other the way they do here. What do women wear for the most part? Clothing is more functional. Women wear very similar clothing as men when working or training. In our free time or with our family and friends, clothing is much more individualized. Long dresses, knitted sweaters, and pants are still quite popular. You'll have to forgive me, I'm not very good at describing women's clothing. Are the Amish alive and well? Yes, I believe they are. What is the birth rate? I don't know the exact figures, but having children is radically lower than it is now. It is the one thing I wish we had that you enjoy here. Is there an unusual rate of birth defects? Yes, mostly stillborn. You said that your culture was centered around universities. Why weren't they wiped out in the war? Not all major universities are in large cities. Do you use cell phones? Yes, we use a form of cell phone. Do people eat red meat? Yes, but not as much as you do. Do people drive cars? Yes, but they are not produced in nearly the same numbers or used in the same way. Are airlines in operation? Yes, but again, not nearly as many. Do airlines travel internationally? Yes, but most people don't really want to go overseas. Are people pressured into a Christian doctrine? No, not at all. Do the police make drug busts? No. Are there jails? What kind of criminals are in them? Yes, there are jails, mostly theft, fraud, rape, and murder. What kind of public punishment is there? Hard labor, community service, banishment, which means you got to leave their community and go to another community, or public execution. Your justice system sounds like New England during religious persecution and intolerance. He says, how do you define intolerance? We don't really have the energy or desire to waste time being intolerant. If you produce and help the community, then you can do pretty much anything you want within the law. Are there herbal medicines and alternative lifestyles? Yes. Is there personal freedom? Yes, the same freedoms you enjoy under the Constitution. Is there an IRS? Yes, we pay taxes. Sounds like you don't like keeping track of your personal income taxes. I don't think anyone does. He clarifies that later. No, there is not an income tax, but there are taxes for local stuff, electricity, other things that you need. Is the same type of currency used? Is ours today good in 2010 or 2020? Yes, we use money. That's a good question. I don't see why you couldn't use your current bills in the future. Other than time travel, how do most people get around in the country? Do people travel much? There is a high-speed train system, horseback, bike, walking. Automobiles are used for sport and some transportation. Are people suspicious of strangers, or are all you people just one big happy family? There is still conflict and mistrust. Yes, I am suspicious of strangers. I think that's an instinct we are given to help us stay alive. Are we traveling in space in 2036? Not yet, but they are working on it. Has first contact with aliens happened? No, not that I'm aware of. What is the next movement in music? I appreciate your frustration. Whatever, nothing. Is there any more background information you can give? Once I leave, I would not want any attention to come to me or my family. No. I'm sure in 2036 there is a tendency to tease one's detractors if they make themselves available. I have no intention of teasing anyone, but I do grow tired of the same cycle over and over again. Eventually the people who do not like me or what I have to say, real or not, will win. I will either leave or grow tired of answering the same questions. If your most vociferous detractor continually puts on weak attacks, it takes attention. Again, please not confuse. Whatever. You said the position of women is controversial and conservative in 2036. What does that mean? It certainly isn't disrespectful. I apologize if it sounded that way. It's one of those areas I realize will be difficult to discuss because we may lack similar experiences. In 2036, there is not a desire to have it all. With factors such as the difficulty in conceiving and the decentralization of production and industry, there is not an unrealistic scramble to have a career and a family. Out of necessity and circumstance, family life has become more traditional. However, there are many families that where the wife/mother is the main breadwinner and the husband/father remains at home with the family. The difference is in the method of decision making. People do not have children if they are able, unless they can devote the required resources to maintain it. Unlike today, where everyone has a ghetto baby, and I'll just go on the system. And when that's not looking too good, I'll have another baby and just go on the system while I sit on my fat butt and do nothing. That's the American way, coming slowly but surely. I mean, you can see it. What type of money system do you have in your world line? It is not very different than it is now. Yes, we have money and credit cards. However, like everything else, the monetary system is decentralized. Banking is based mostly around the community structure. There are no multinational banking or computerized economic systems. There are also no income taxes. Is there an IRS and a need to keep a lot of recipient receipts and paperwork? Yes, we pay taxes. Again, not income taxes. I hope one day when I get the planet cleaned up, it will be a nice place to live on again and no one will want to leave it. On the other hand, if time travel were commonplace right now, I think a great many people would leave and perhaps never return. There is also a suggestion that time travel might make an interesting punishment. However, I don't think we have the right to force criminals or unsuspecting world lines and sending them to the Stone Age might be a bit much. I find this fascinating. Has California had the big earthquake? The big one, he asked. As you are experiencing now, there are earthquakes, storms, and other unfortunate surprises that from Mother Nature that have impacts on your society and future history. That is one reason I won't go into detail. However, don't worry too much about major portions of coastline slipping underwater. What music do 20-year-olds listen to? People listen to all types of music. Blah, blah, blah. What's the future of cloning? Cloning full people has been determined to be medically and ethically unsound. We do have research and progress in cloning body parts and creating more viable sperm and egg production. Any more on Bill Gates? Not really, just curious. Why is he of such interest? Do people wear chips yet? No, people value their personal independence and ability to take care of themselves. Is reverse speech used in the future? I am not familiar with reverse speech. What about earthquakes in California or Nevada? No, I can't. Besides, I see others predicting earthquakes and very few people pay attention to them. Are the Great Pyramids standing in 2036? Yes, although one of them was severely damaged. How's communication? By the way, if Egypt right now gets out of control more than it already is, and somehow a war, World War III starts, and if one of the pyramids gets blown up or gets hit by a rocket or something, do me a favor and send me a message. Hey Joe, that time travel thing was right. The Egyptian pyramids, is now one of them's hurt badly. Just to remind me, appreciate that. Where was I? How's communication around the world in 2036? Do you still have literature widely available? Yes, books and other literature are available, but most of the distribution is via the net. What's the latest book you read that you were only able to hear about in your own time? The latest book I read was the autobiography of the Red Baron compiled from letters to his mother. Is new literature also available? Yes. Is the English language segmenting? Is tourism still strong and thriving in 2036? I would say the English language is pretty much the same as it is now. There are differences in slang and figures of speech, but it's nothing you wouldn't pick up. Yes, I suppose we do have tourism. Can you tell me when the police stop busting people for weed? It happens about the same time they stop coming to your house when you dial 911. Interesting comment. Do they start pushing for legalization earlier than the war? It's not really an issue of the government letting you do something. It's more like they have other things to worry about. Don't you feel you're capable of taking care of yourself? If you want to take mood-altering drugs, why should my opinion stop you from that? They don't stop you from taking alcohol, tobacco, or fast food. In any case, it also lets Darwin take over. One of the reasons drug abuse isn't a major problem in 2036 is because no one wants to die from it, and everyone else who did is already dead. No, are people using reverse speech? Not that I'm aware of. Again, same question. Where do you attend high school, and what did you graduate? Where did you graduate? No, I did not have a high school experience. Why is it not okay to give us information about near future, but it's okay to take back emails and modify other world lines? I'm not saying anything in your messages. You are. Are you suggesting I edit your emails? Are you unable to weigh the consequences of your opportunity, and I am now responsible for what you might say to yourself? Now that you have the chance to put your own morals to the test, do you feel you're incapable of living up to your own standards? Is it wrong to say one thing and not something else? If you feel you should tell yourself to buy a certain stock, then I suppose you are willing to take that risk that your advice doesn't prove wrong in the next few days. Whatever I might do, I would consider the fact that someday you will have to address this question again as an entire society. Why would I offer to make this video, if I thought it would expose me? If it makes you feel better, I doubt it will change your mind anyway, but I will give you something to talk about when I'm gone. I think that's the greatest gift I could give you. Do most people of that time, his time, die, especially ones that currently have health problems? Yes, and people are still dying, and a great deal of them are passing from that mad cow disease. CJD is what it stands for. It's something like Crux-Jacobs disease or something like that. As I said with my very first few posts almost 6 months ago, I want to emphasize how devastating this will be. I believe 2 people are confirmed dead in Colorado from CDJ from surgical instruments. Again, the power of cheese. Milk does a body good, and beef, it's what's for dinner. Me? No, I have not tried any fast food. Thinking about where the food came from, how it was shipped and treated absolutely terrifies me. Talking about now. I have tried to tell people about mad cow disease, and it seems to be catching on in Europe. Me. He says, I do not eat or use products. He's telling us, do not eat or use products from any animal that is fed or eats parts of its own dead. Me. Him again. The mad cow story is yet to begin here on this world line. Let me see where we're at. I'm over an hour. It's time to shut it down. I'll continue tomorrow.